Okay, and with that, we are live for episode 223 of Trek Live. How you doing this morning, Dan?
Doing good. Doing some a little bit of technical difficulties here, but I think we've got it sorted out. So apologizes for being a little late, but yeah, excited for today's topic.
Yeah, we got a lot to cover. We're going to talk TNG Season 3, which we finished over the last several weeks. We're into Season 4 now. For a rewatch recap, we're going to do kind of an extended look back at Season 3, do our episode rankings. Mine are on Twitter. Dan hasn't put his out there yet. This will be the first time they're out. And just talk about the season as a whole, how we're feeling about it. It's often picked as like an all-timer kind of a season. I guess we'll bat around how we feel about that idea. And of course, we'll kind of wrap up in the back half talking about Star Trek Picard, No-Win Scenario, and Imposter. Episodes 4 and 5 have aired since the last time we have chatted. So we'll cover our thoughts there. And it all kind of fits together. TNG, Picard, it's all kind of cohesive and makes for a pretty natural, I think, connection for topics this week. So definitely looking forward to that. Where are you with your rewatch now? Before we get into season 3, I know I know I took a weekend off to like be a movie freak last weekend, so I didn't watch anything for a week. This weekend, I've kind of done not much besides watching TNG season 4.
You've turned and burned.
I did.
Yeah. So I believe I just watched The Lost.
Okay.
I believe so. I'm just 10 episodes into the fourth season. So yeah, you can definitely tell that there's a little bit of drop off, but there's still some great episodes.
Mm-hmm.
In the early part of the season. So, yeah, where are you?
Last night I finished off.
Season no.
Yeah, no. Cupid was the last one I watched. Okay. So that's like 20. So I'm getting there. I think I got one more weekend in me for season 4, but it'll be interesting to talk at the end. Maybe next time we're here, even as just part of our mini rewatch recap, maybe bat around like the differences between 3 and 4. They're often lumped together, kind of like 1 and 2 are, as like this early kickoff of TNG proper, and they kind of get paired up, I think, a lot. And it'll be interesting to maybe think about the strengths and weaknesses of maybe both of those seasons. I'm really enjoying season 4. I mentioned somewhere along the way yesterday on Twitter, I said that Identity Crisis is, I think, the first memory I have of seeing Trek like as it was happening.
Yeah.
So I have like a lot of nostalgia for this season. Right around that point of the season, there start to become like real early childhood memories like associated with not so much like full episodes but moments in some of them. I remember in the Nth Degree, Barclay and Geordi on the shuttle when Barclay gets hit by the wave of energy. Like I just remember like seeing that really, really young and it making an impression on me. So this is like a stretch of TNG, like mid to late season 4, where I start to get some real I start to be able to associate like memories of the episodes coming out a little bit, not much, but little windows into that. So I'm enjoying that, and this is definitely, I think, the point where TNG kind of hits its stride. Maybe even more so. That's just kind of foreshadow maybe what we talk about in the future with 3 and 4's differences. But I think season 4 might be the season where they really nail down the genre bending. This is a romance with this character. This is a horror story with that character. Each episode is very, very distinctive tonally and who the lead is. And I think that's season 4 might be the point when that kind of trademark for the Berman era kind of gets locked in a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. I think they dabble with it a little bit in season 3 for sure. I won't get into it, but I think for sure, season 4.
Yeah. So really enjoying it. It's we mentioned this last week, and I'm sure we'll mention it for as long as Picard's running. I think we in a perfect world, of course, like maybe the ideal scenario would be to finish TNG and go right into Picard season 3, have the whole show kind of, cohesively done with all of it fresh in mind. But I think there's something to be said for being like right in the middle of it and right in the meaty middle of the Next Generation while we're watching Picard season 3 unfold. We're like, I feel like I'm so like in that headspace with those characters and feeling comfortable being there with them that it's enhancing my Picard season 3 experience. So
Yeah, and just even like, you know, things in this last season of Picard are changing my perspective on some of these
totally.
episodes that we're just watching. So
Yeah.
it's really good. I'm really happy and really thankful that, because I think initially we had our goal was to be done by now, but
Sure.
yeah, it's really nice to be just how everything's lining up.
Yeah, because if you finish it, it's all about like how did the Next Generation episodes that we just watched over the course of however long it took feed into watching Picard. Like, what do we take from that? And it's actually kind of working the opposite way for us. I think we're like taking stuff we're seeing in Picard and feeding it into the Next Gen episodes, which is really cool. And I'm totally into that. I think it was a happy accident, sort of, that we're like right in the middle of the Next Generation right now. But I'm glad we are, because it definitely is. Like, I know a couple episodes that you recently watched, like episode like Future Imperfect, with when Riker's like seeing a potential future version of himself, dealing with being a father and a captain, with Picard as an admiral. Like, it's impossible to watch that without thinking about like what actually ends up happening and how there are subtle differences and subtle similarities too with how it all plays out in these old episodes. So yeah, really cool. All right, so we'll talk about season 3 as a kind of cohesive season, a collective season for a bit here. I've kind of long felt like season 1 of the original series and season 3 of The Next Generation are my two favorites. Like, when I do these projects and I average the episodes out and I come up with like a GPA for the seasons, like I'm one to do, pretty consistently that's how it works out. Sometimes they flip, like which one's on top of between those two, but pretty often they're at the very top of the list. And I think that's a product of just the consistency of the season. Like, there really aren't very many misfires. I mean, they're all, there are a few for sure. Like, there are a couple that are down at the bottom of both of our lists when we put them on the screen that are pretty consistently going to be there. That are stinkers that are going to be there in a season of 26 episodes. But there are a lot of like upper level, kind of classic episodes at the top of this list that really define what the Next Generation is going to become. And I think that's part of it too. I think having it be sort of like, it's not season 1. The show is well established by the time we get into season 3, but it's kind of the kickoff of the TNG that people, think about and maybe remember most prominently, just the visual version of the show, the tonal version of the show. So it's a tone setter in a lot of ways. So.
Yeah, I think the next 10 years of Trek is like
all
them trying to recapture and just drawing from that, these 26 episodes that we're about to go over. So it's just very interesting in the way that happens. And I would have to agree with Bill. It's probably the most consistent season. There's one or two that are, I would say, just complete misfires, like Bill said, but there's also things in those misfires that I think make for interesting conversations, and that I'm still thinking about them today. So I'm excited for it.
Spoiler alert, I think the episode at the bottom of both of our lists is one that is safely at the bottom of my list. It's pretty much been there for forever as my least favorite episode of season 3. However, like you said, even in these misfires, even in the weaker episodes, there are kind of elements that are either interesting to unpack and think about. I'm thinking of another episode that's at the bottom of our list, A Matter of Perspective, like towards the bottom of it, where I feel like there's a lot of meat on the bones. There are things to think about. It leaves you with things to talk about. It's not just kind of like a dead experience where it kind of just happens and then you're over it. There are things to consider and unpack in the wake of it, even if you're not high on it. Menage a Troy is both of our least favorite episode of season 3. But there's so much Riker and Troy stuff that because of where we know that goes, that it's kind of impossible to divorce it from being important to the show and having like a lasting impact in some ways. So
yeah, like if I try to put my head like in the headspace of like see it or skip it, back in the day when I used to do that, it's like, can I say skip that? Because
you can, but you're going to miss out on like
a lot of stuff that is such a core, I feel like, relationship to one of these relationships in TNG. It's just hard.
Yeah. If you want to, if knowing where Riker and Troy end up, if kind of in your mind, it's important to like see that be on again, off again, have its ebbs and flows and peaks and valleys. Menage Troy is critical to that. I mean, it's telling you that over the course of these 7 years, they, it's kind of a fluid thing that maybe at points it's more of a, they dabble in the romantic stuff of their past and they kind of tap into those things, and maybe at other points they don't. And it's kind of always alive. It doesn't go dead. It would be easy to do, especially in a 1980s, 1990s show, to kind of just avoid that, especially for two characters that have a lot of other romantic stuff going on over the course of the show, to just kind of ignore that it's there and that there's an attraction there and a history there and the potential for something there. But because of episodes like Menage a Troy, it's easy to accept, I think, that it's always kind of bubbling, and it's always a possibility that it could go that way, and it does. And it's such a critical part of what plays out, with what we're seeing now at the end of the story, with Picard season 3 and Picard season 1 and Nemesis. Like it's impossible to take it away from being an important factor with both of those characters. So
yeah, even in like an episode like The Lost, which isn't technically in the season, obviously, but there's still some good stuff there.
Absolutely, yeah. It's really impressive to when you watch. I mean, we'll get into this later. We're kind of going fluid here, but that's cool. Picard season 3, like seeing how it's almost like it's something that's easy for people to try to do, I think, and you see a lot of it. People asking for these kinds of things, like give me like a curated list of episodes to watch before Picard season 3. Like, yeah, you could do that. I'm sure anybody could like package like a key run, but what we're finding, I think, because of how we're doing it, is that it's little things like all through it that are like just woven into the fabric of all of the episodes that are kind of being pulled into season 3. Like that's I think maybe one of the geniuses of what they're doing in this season of Picard is that it's really like so baked into the details of the characters and the Next Generation story that it's not just about like, oh, it's a sequel to like these 10 episodes if you link them all together. It's a sequel to the show. Like it's a continuation of the story of the show and those characters. So that's because you're right. Like in The Lost, there are moments between Riker and Deanna that are important to consider.
But it's not necessarily like the driving force of the episode, right? It's
right.
Just like it's just little things like that.
Yeah. So season 3, I'll just put the ranks up because that kind of drives our conversation. Under me, you'll see mine. Under Dan, you'll see his on the screen if you're watching us. And we have a lot of similarities, like we always do, but there's some variance in here. We have, the top 3 are the same with a little shuffling.
I can already see a really big jump of one episode.
Captain's.
Captain's Holiday.
Yeah, that's.
We'll get there.
I think we should just get right to it. I mean, I think that's like the easiest place to go. Is when we put these up next to each other, like where is the difference? And I think that's the obvious one for sure. I have it at 23 out of 26. You have it at 12. So you have it in your upper half. You're definitely a fan of Captain's Holiday. What about it works for you? And just talk about what has it like, because I mean, Yeah, it's above, Hollow Pursuits, The Most Toys, The Hunted,
Yeah,
Instance of Command, Tin Man. Like they're pretty good episodes too. So you have it like right in the thick of the good stuff
I
of the
just
season.
I just really like that we finally get to see like a more casual Picard, and I
Yeah.
really like that we get to see like it's kind of pun intended here, but like have Picard let his hair down and
Hmm.
be able to just like um see a different side of Picard that we don't usually get to see, and I think
Yeah.
it just adds more wrinkles to the character where he's like
Plus.
he doesn't have to be like this authority figure
Hmm.
that we've seen like how many episodes have we seen him kind of in that realm. So I think
Sure.
this season in particular, I think we do get to see um, this season, and then the next season we get to see like a different side of Picard, where like episodes like family and
Family.
things like
Yeah.
that, where it's like this really different side of Picard, and it just it just adds interests and um, it humanizes him.
Hmm.
Like it's
Texture.
we,
Yeah.
yeah, we just I feel like there's more meat on the bones now with this character because um, we get to see um, a different side of him that we've never seen before,
Yeah.
and I like the I know the I have a problem with maybe the like the enemy, like the threat. It's a very kind of dimensional like antagonist here, but I think the beauty is the chemistry between those two kind of characters um, that we get to see throughout the episode. But
Yeah.
no, I just really like it for the fact that um, that we get to see a different side of Picard, and then there's some really great banter with him and Riker. It just
Yes.
has a
That's
lot
my
of
favorite thing in it.
great stuff.
Mhm. Yeah, I echo a lot of that. I mean, I'm lower on it because of some of the things you alluded to as maybe the weaker side of it. I think the time travel, the once it becomes a sort of Jeopardy, a story with some Jeopardy to it, is where it kind of loses me a little bit. But I think that first half with the crew and Riker most prominently kind of pressuring him to take shore leave and go, and talking about Ryza and the things it has to offer, and his kind of early scenes there, I think are really good for all the reasons you said. I mean, it gets. You're right. I mean, Picard, especially up to that point, I don't want to say he's one note. He's definitely not. I mean, we learn a lot about Picard in the first 2.5 seasons of the show, but this is definitely a side of him that we hadn't gotten to see. Like, what's he like when he's off duty and he can kind of try to relax, like, and maybe tap into. The thing I like about it the most is we know that when Picard was younger, he was a little bit more of a rogue. He had more careless instincts until he had his heart situation. The way it's always presented is like that's kind of a life changing experience for him, and he, as he gets older and matures into his career, post that, he becomes kind of the Picard that we know as Captain of the Enterprise. But pre that, he's a little more of a risk taker and a little bit more gung ho. And Captain's Holiday and his relationship with Vash kind of taps into that. Like you get to see little shades of what that Picard would have been like, and I do appreciate it for that. It also, if you're talking about like enhancing the greater world of Trek, it establishes Ryza, which is like woven into a ton of it. And it's even though we don't go there very often, how often are characters talking about Ryza? When we go a few times in Enterprise and Deep Space Nine, we go back in TNG a little later down the road, but it's a big deal. Like it gets talked about a lot, and it establishes some key stuff. Um, so yeah.
Yeah. And I also think that it just fits kind of his character. Like I don't think, and not just maybe Picard, but any captain, you can't just like flip a switch like you're off captain mode. Like it,
Yeah.
I feel like you would have to do
So
something.
he is.
Like I,
Right.
I don't know if the stack of books is really the true like getaway for a captain. I feel like they've got to be doing something other than just being a captain. So I think it's perfect for kind of that.
Yeah, I agree. We agree more than we don't, even though the result of where the episode sits might be pretty different. I mean, I gave it a C. If you go back to where I reviewed it on Twitter, and you can see some of the other graphics that I put out on that platform with episode grades and how they sit. I mean, it's not a D, it's not an F. I don't think it's a bad episode. I think it's a more mid range with some mixed results uh, in a season loaded with a lot of really good stuff that I gravitate a little more towards. But it does do a lot for the Picard character and for the next generation, I think. Um,
But there's such a large like B range. I feel like,
yeah,
to use your type of letter grade, like, after maybe like Sarek or Deja Q, it's like all those. I feel like until maybe the lower 20s, like it's pretty like in that B range where I feel like it's a testament to how consistent this season is.
yeah. I was going to be my next question. Like, where would you kind of divide out? Like, where do you see little drop offs, maybe in terms of like from the classics to the really good, the B? So you're thinking Deja Q, but Booby Trap is kind of where that, like, it's good, maybe it's not great. It's rock solid B.
Yeah, B plus range kind
Right.
of starts, I think, for sure.
Gotcha.
But I mean, yeah, that's like almost 8 to 10 episodes where you could say like, hey, these are kind of B,
Mm-hmm.
C plus range episodes. Where I feel like for the Star Trek season, that's pretty dang good, especially early on in TNG.
Yeah, yeah. And coming off of the first two seasons, which are maybe a little less consistent, and might have a smaller batch of those. The C range is maybe a little thicker in season two, for example, and certainly season one. How many episodes on that list would you say your thumb would be pointed down on? Like that, like without going into like the see it, skip it kind of, because that gets hard. It's a lot more complicated. But episodes that you might be just kind of get a sense of, like, out of 26, what's the hit rate here? Like, how many of them would you kind of go less successful? Maybe your thumb is down. Like,
Like,
what do you think?
Two or three, maybe?
Two or three? Yeah, that's kind of where I am too. I think A Matter of Perspective and Menage a Troy, I think are C minus D plus for me. Everything above that is like a C or better. So like at least average, like middle of the road or better. We kind of mentioned it earlier. Like A Matter of Perspective, for example, though, it's kind of towards the bottom of our lists. I think like I said, there's a lot to talk about. At least there's like it might be a misfire. It might be not the most successful episode, but it's a conversation starter. Like if you had, like, back in the day, if like they do now, a lot of shows do, a lot of podcasts, a lot of YouTube channels do like their video or podcast review of an episode. Like The Matter of Perspective is going to generate a long conversation. Like there's just a lot to unpack and talk about with character choices and presentation of the characters and the way the story plays out. Whether people are hot or cold on it, at least there's something to talk about. It's not kind of a flat. You gotta like stretch to get some interesting things to chat and bat around. Like some episodes might be more so. Even the less successful ones definitely have some interesting points.
I almost feel like Riker is like, it feels like his character changes. Like he's almost like objectified a little bit in this season. Like
Maybe.
A Matter of Perspective, obviously, but even like Deja Q and the Vengeance Factor, like he's just, it seems like he's always interacting with.
Yeah,
I don't know, and even in like The Offspring, like
his one scene.
His one scene in there is.
It's true. It's actually true.
It's changes a little bit, I think.
It's interesting that one of the things I remember talking about with season 2 when we did this was we both talked about how we felt like Riker might have been the MVP of that season with episodes like Peak Performance and A Matter of Honor being high on both of our lists that really leaned into Riker, and a lot of his best qualities were like very prominently on display. And then on both of our lists in our bottom 3 are episodes that he's pretty heavy in.
A Riker episode.
Menage a Troy is maybe more of a Luoxana, Deanna kind of a thing, with Riker kind of along for the ride, but he's on screen a lot there. And then certainly the Vengeance Factor and A Matter of Perspective, I would say, are Riker episodes. Matter of Perspective, certainly. Vengeance Factor, maybe a little cloudier with like just kind of labeling it as a Riker episode, but he's certainly very central to that story. So just an interesting little wrinkle, and I think you're right. I think they do maybe fall into a little bit of a trap at times with kind of writing Riker as the heartthrob, the sex symbol of the show and the ship, and is sometimes a little less interesting than what we see in season 2 in episodes like Matter of Honor and Peak Performance, where you see him as like this, young leader, young aspiring captain who's learning under Picard, and it has a different style than Picard, but is no less like capable and uses those skills. Those skills are on display in episodes like that. But at the same time, like my number 2, your number 3 is Best of Both Worlds Part 1, which I think is really, the easy go-to there is it's the Borg and it's Locutus and Wolf 359, like all that stuff is Best of Both Worlds, like what I think people associate with that. But that's a heavy Riker and much more exploring the things that I think we gravitated so heavily towards in season 2, especially with Riker, with his career and wanting to be a captain, but being content on the Enterprise and enjoying being on the Enterprise and feeling like that's his home. And I think, like a lot of us do, especially I've always felt like this, the older I get, the more I appreciate the Riker story of the Best of Both Worlds more, because when you're an adult and you're in these kinds of pivot point, decision points in your life with the jobs and where you're going to live and what you're going to do and what kinds of life paths you're going to take, inevitably we're all put in those positions. So it's so easy to relate to Riker being in this like crossroad situation and feeling like there's a real choice to be made. That's a difficult one, because I know you've been there, I've been there with certain things in our life paths, and it's definitely, I think it's my favorite thing about those episodes, maybe even more so than the Borg antagonistic stuff. So.
Yeah, because I think the further you get away from it, you kind of, and even lately, it shed the light more on Picard, obviously, because he has a show about it and everything.
Yes,
but
yeah.
I would have to agree. I think that it's really good stuff. And I think you get it's Riker being the captain without actually being the captain, where it's like, and so it's just like we get a taste of like what would it be like if Riker was captain. So, which we get a little bit of it in season 2, but yeah, this is just to hold on to the lever. It's really good.
And I think it actually, like, one of the things that people would, I'm sure, talk about back in the day when this was coming out, like in Arsenal Freedom, they talk about, he was offered a command and turned it down. In the Icarus Factor, he's offered a command, he turns it down. Best of Both Worlds, he's offered a command and is kind of waffling on it. Like, that could run into some one note, like, how often are we going to do this? And put him in this position where he's got to choose, right? The experience of the Best of Both Worlds, I think, makes it credible that he would kind of be like, no, I'm done with this for now. Like, I'm happy here. His association of like being captain in the immediate wake of that is, filling in for Picard when he's assimilated and might be dead. I mean, you might not get him back, and it's Wolf 359 and defending Earth, and like he might come out of that. You could see a person coming out of that experience and being like, I kind of like being first officer of the Enterprise and learning under Picard, and like there might be some like trauma associated with, you might have to overcome some things to become comfortable with taking on that captain role more permanently. So I think it almost kind of like puts a button on that topic and that character point for the rest of the show. I think it makes it more credible that he's not continually being pursued and isn't kind of turning down captaincies all the time. To make it credible that he's there. So I think it's another like maybe under talked about, like you said, because of Picard and First Contact, it becomes real easy to hone in on the Locutus stuff and how it affects Picard, but I think it's no less impactful for Riker too. We have the same top 3. We have that, Yesterday's Enterprise, and The Offspring. We have the same top 5 even. Who Watches the Watchers, The Defector. Just reshuffled order of those 5 at the top of our lists. Was that easy? Like, did you feel like there was a pretty cut? Like, where did it feel like those groups were? Like,
it felt pretty easy to lock in the top 5. I think, after that, you could definitely, like, I could be talked into release Sins of the Father being, 6, or
sure,
Sarek being up maybe 1 or 2. It's just,
yeah.
I think just a testament to how good this season is, and like how many times I've seen this episode. But I think, I feel like I don't know if I'll ever, reshuffle, the top 5. But I think, this middle, the mushy middle, I think with, that B- to B+ range, I could be definitely talked into, things like that. And even like the bottom, I think too, we had a great discussion about A Matter of Perspective, not to keep coming back to that, but I think that even like things like that can definitely change. And I think that's important to remember, like when you go into a new rewatch, if you're coming into a season that you've seen many times, or it has prowess, it's really good. I think it's okay to be okay with keeping the ones that you like up there, but I think it's also just as important to be able to look at an episode like A Matter of Perspective and be like, okay, how can this go from possibly a 26 ranking to maybe up a few, to be like, okay, there's something here that I could really kind of enjoy, or even like a Captain's Holiday, like it's more lighthearted, whereas like the past 3 or 4 years, Picard has been so like not so lighthearted, where it's like dealing with some of his past, with obviously the Borg and stuff like that, and some big dramatic swings. Like, it's nice to see him in kind of a lighthearted sort of situation.
Most definitely.
Yeah.
I totally also agree that middle portion, like those episodes in the teens, for example, and probably both of our lists are where, like, I feel like the most variance probably happens if you come back to TNG again in a couple of years, 3 years, and you rewatch it with more context in your life to compare it to, and just more time between viewings. That's where I feel like the most shuffling can happen. In my experience, at least, as doing, this is my 4th one on Twitter, that's where I feel like I move around the most. That top handful, maybe I flip-flop a thing here or there, but I think that middle portion is where there's the most flipping around and changing exactly how they stack. And like you said, season 3's got a big group of them, where they're maybe not classics, maybe not like the best of the best, but really good rock solid episodes of Star Trek, The Next Generation, and Star Trek as a whole, that are like, that's what makes the show good. Like, you get into like kind of a more middle ground episode that's like, you don't remember because it's not talked about all the time. It's not like, okay, here's yesterday's Enterprise, or here's Best of Both Worlds. Like, it's Allegiance, or it's The Most Toys, like something like that isn't covered as often, and works really well. What else kind of stands out to you? Any, we talked about a good handful of these episodes as we went through our rewatch recaps, as we do anyway. Like, we've definitely talked about Allegiance. I know we covered that. We watched that right around the time, I feel like, of Picard season 3 premiering, and there's some things in that with Picard and Crusher that are like impossible to watch without thinking about the kickoff of season 3 of Picard, especially. I think the high ground, even, I have it at 18. You have it at, where do you have it? 18. Both at 18.
Yeah.
Exact same place. Like episodes like that for Crusher, especially, that episode opens with like a terrorist attack happening, and the instinct of everybody is to get the heck out. Like, we're here to help. We're not here to get involved. Beam out and don't get your hands dirty. And what does she do? She runs up and inserts herself, tries to help, and gets herself kidnapped by doing it. Like that, an episode like that, I think, is really critical to laying down the groundwork that, like, she would do something like she's doing in Picard season 3. Like, she'll go rogue and kind of leave and go off and do what she thinks is right, and not necessarily just follow, Starfleet says it's okay to go to these planets, but not these ones. Like, this is our focus, not so much that. Like, she's never been one to, like, kind of blindly, go along with that. She's going to do what she feels like is the right thing to do. And episodes like Symbiosis back in season 1 and in this season, I think it's the high ground. I think really are key to, again, like laying groundwork for things that are going to come much later down the road and are still coming.
Yeah, and it also has great like this sci-fi concept of like this technology, this transporter
Personal
technology.
transporter, yeah.
That's just like it's interesting, but it's also like it's not an easy watch to kind of like okay these people are using this technology and it's killing them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Slowly.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just things like that. There's really tough things to think about in this episode that I am constantly like even like 2 or 3 days after watching the episode. It's like I'm thinking about
the choices, yeah,
and the choices, and that's also the tough thing about. And I'm not trying to knock anything like this, but like putting down like 10 episodes in a season where it's like I don't know, I just would almost would want some time with some of these episodes.
Of course, yeah.
That are even like technically middle of the road in the season. So it's just I don't know.
The 10 episode season is a very different thing, and I'm glad that we had these 26 episode seasons because I think it's important. Like I just said earlier, like those middle episodes, middle grounds, they don't all need to be classics. Like sometimes it's the underdog little middle of the road ones that are like that's what makes the show. That's what makes the show good. That's the middle ground. And because there are 26 of them, you listen to enough interviews of people who worked on those shows, and it feels like they were grinded into the ground for the years they worked on them. I totally get that. And you hear people talking like Ron Moore and Braga and people who write especially are like, thank God we don't have to do that anymore. But you do I miss that. I miss having that wider swath of episodes where there's a more variable, maybe quality, but there's a comfort in having that degree of content. Yeah. I think what else here? What else kind of stands out? Are there any other like more notable differences? Captain Holiday is the one that really stands out.
Yeah,
I think everything else is
the biggest swing. Everything else feels like it's just 2 or 3.
Yeah, within spots of each other.
Yeah. Which I feel like that just comes down to kind of personal preference.
Yeah. Like I'm not surprised that you have Sins of the Father a couple spots higher than me. I love Sins of the Father, but I know like that's a Dan episode to me for sure. Like when I just imagine like that's gonna sit high for you. I think it's cool that you have the Defector and the Enemy back to back. They're kind of
they feel
connected.
So similar,
yeah,
and connected, and we're about to jump into more kind of Romulan focused storytelling in TNG. But I just feel that I think they both just feel like there is some elements of mystery, but there's also like typical Star Trek fashion. There's like an olive branch like that's kind of extended. It's always tough. So those are always tough to kind of separate because I feel like they are so strong together.
Yeah. Do you feel like there's an MVP of the season, kind of like we said Riker maybe last year? It's so much harder, I think, in season 3 because they all kind of have their high points, and they each have a couple episodes, at least a handful of episodes that are really focused on them.
Yeah, because I think, like you said, this is where we're kind of dipping our toe into the water of like, okay, this is more of like a focused on this type of character. It still is. It still has that true kind of Star Trek ensemble feel. I think, in some episodes, and then some characters are just not in the episode, like in the Offspring. Like there's, and maybe there's reason because some people direct and stuff like that. But Riker's is not in the Offspring. So I think you I don't know. It's still a true ensemble show, obviously, but it's also like we're kind of dipping more into how it's TNG structured, where it's like it's kind of focused on.
It's a Data episode, or it's a Worf episode, Crusher episode,
exactly.
right? Yeah, definitely. And that makes it. I think that does make it kind of harder because when you do that, it bounces around. Like they all have their highlights. You know, I could
sometimes lowlights as well.
Sometimes, yeah. Like I wouldn't. I think Riker's amazing in the best of both worlds, but I wouldn't like. He's not the MVP of season 3 like he is in 2 because of being heavily factored in some of those weaker episodes. Worf, I think, is a big. It gets a lot to do. I think Sins of the Father. I think the enemy when he refuses to give the blood to the Romulan is a really big. Like if you're looking for like what makes Worf for the long haul, like what's kind of establishing his principles and the kinds of character notes that are going to be played for into Deep Space Nine. Even this is kind of the year with his relationship with the Klingon Empire and he's got a different set of principles than everybody around him. Like he's not human. Everybody else on the crew probably makes a different choice in the enemy. They probably give the blood up, but he is not going to do it. He would have if he was ordered. If Picard would have said you're going to do it, he would have done it because he follows orders. But if he gets the choice, he's not going to do it. So I'm, Worf is tempting. For me, Data is tempting. The Offspring, Deja Q. I think he's awesome in Deja Q.
Yeah.
With Q. Picard, I think he's phenomenal in even episodes that he's not necessarily the focus. I've talked about this. I think every time we talk about the Offspring, I mention. I think like my favorite heroic moment for Picard is standing up for Data in the Offspring to the Admiral. Like, no, not on my ship, and not while I'm your captain. Hold your ground. Like those lines are like all timers for me. That exchange with the Admiral. I think he's amazing. I think Patrick Stewart's amazing in yesterday's Enterprise particularly the scenes with Whoopi Goldberg. I think yesterday's Enterprise is the best guy in an episode. The leap of faith that's necessary to like buy that resolution forces. I think it calls for Patrick Stewart and Whoopi Goldberg to play the crap out of those scenes to get us to believe that Picard would take that leap of faith. Long way of saying I don't know if I have one because I don't know how you pick one over the other. But those are the ones that come to mind. I think the most for me, those three: Picard, Data, Worf. Just on the strength of their episodes. Was yesterday's Enterprise easy for you to put it number one?
Yeah, I think so because it like checks all the boxes of what I would think is like a really great episode. Like there's like this great sci-fi concept, but there's also like this really tough decision you'd have to make, and again, it's like you're thinking about this episode like days after. Like, what would I do if I was a crew member on the Enterprise? Would I go back?
Yeah.
I know everybody likes to say like, yeah, I would, but what would happen?
Yeah.
And it's interesting because it brings up of like these people face life and death decisions every day, and it's just like I don't know. It's a really great episode. Yeah, I will stop there.
Yeah, we've covered it for sure. I the thing that always kind of I used to say Best of Both Worlds was my number one of this season and of TNG, and for the last couple of these, I've given the edge to yesterday's Enterprise, and I think what gets me there is I think yesterday's Enterprise has the most to do. Like it's got the big science fiction, it's got the emotional pull. I think there are emotional beats in it that are really effective. I think of Guinan sitting down with Geordi at the end, tell me about Tasha Yar, and the like just like when you think about how much it has to establish that this is like an alternate future. This is an old Enterprise that got destroyed in our past. It's dealing with
45 minutes.
All this in 45 minutes. It's dealing with the character that died 2 years ago and is now back and is dealing with, the way she died and giving a new resolution to that character. It's got the Picard guy and stuff I mentioned before. Like, there's just a lot. There's a lot. The characters from the Enterprise C, Captain Garrett, Lieutenant Castillo. Like, it's just got so many balls in the air, and it's it's just amazing how well it works. The Picard's That'll Be the Day at the tactical station, firing at the Klingons down to the last minute. Yeah, to me, it's like the perfect episode of Star Trek, really, because it's got it all. It's got the sci-fi concept, it's got the emotion, it's got the character development, and it's got world building that I think we all like in Star Trek. One of the things that pulls us all in is this, like, you can like envelop yourself into it. And yesterday's Enterprise establishes a lot of that, the history and the timeline and the continuity and the canon, whatever you want to call it. So yeah, as far as like level of difficulty and how much it packs into that 45 minutes is it's just wild. So that's not only my favorite episode of the season, it's my favorite episode of Next Generation, unless something crazy happens on this rewatch, which would be surprising. That's my pretty safe answer at this point. Yep. Yeah, I think that does it. I mean, we've covered a lot of these episodes, but it's really interesting to see the rankings side by side. I'm glad there's at least one like substantive difference with Captain's Holiday that we can kind of chime in on, and I think that's revealing of maybe our different tastes a little bit. Everything else is a little more subtle for sure. I'm looking at like the bonding is 3 spots different. I have it at 17. You have it at 20. I have evolution at 20. You have it at 22. Yeah, a lot of them are like 2-3 spots. That's it. So, interesting for sure. So yeah, it'll be interesting again to maybe talk about season 4 in a couple weeks, with maybe a little more finality. Maybe your next episode, maybe the one after that, and think about how the 2 seasons compare in terms of strengths and weaknesses, and yeah, that'll be an extension of this for sure coming up. But let's get into, just for a few minutes here, Picard, where we are now. We have 2 episodes that have gone down since the last time we've been here. No Win Scenario last week, and Imposters this week. So this is obviously spoiler heavy. If you haven't seen Picard, you shouldn't be watching this. You're crazy. So go get caught up if you like Trek Live but aren't watching Picard season 3. Do you have a preference of the 2? What do you think of where we are as a whole? General thoughts.
Yeah, I think I don't know. I feel like these past 2 episodes are probably the best of Picard, I think.
Mm-hmm. Could be, yeah. I think No Win Scenario especially is phenomenal.
I think No Win Scenario, I think is probably the best Picard episode that I've probably seen.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I feel like maybe I'm biased because I'm just like coming off of it, but no, yeah, definitely No Win Scenario for sure. And I think both of these episodes really take big dramatic swings with characters, obviously, and I think that as season goes on, I think I have less issues with the sun aspect, especially like seeing how Picard like deals with some of these like episodes, even in TNG, where he's like he has to be the father figure. Like I feel like that just. I know he really claims he doesn't like children. He doesn't want to be a father. Like he's a career. He has a career in Starfleet, which you get great, just great development in that in Picard and these 2 episodes. So I don't know. It just feels like I've been on cloud 9, and I feel like I know that everybody puts a dark rain cloud or rain shadow because Discovery's ending, but I feel like Star Trek right now is just really solid. Just coming off of Strange New Worlds, Picard. I just think that it's in such a great spot right now, and I cannot believe people saying that this is the end of Star Trek as we know it. I just think that the proof is in the pudding. Like the episodes, like it's not even like you can't even write it off as like, well, it's just the first episode of the season. It's always good. You're gonna have all these feelings about it. It's like no,
we're past that point now.
We're in the middle of it. We're not in the honeymoon phase. We are in the middle of the season, and it's this good. I just just all really good stuff. Really, it's a mystery horror.
Yeah,
I feel like.
Yeah, that's kind of what it's kind of coming down to. Yeah.
And it's interesting because I feel like that's a complete opposite of TNG. You know, there is some horror stuff and stuff, but it's everyone says like it's the lighthearted, optimistic show. It's like, oh, this is like a mystery horror. That's really good.
Yeah, yeah. It's definitely it's going for the episode that it reminds me of, like the season, is Conspiracy. Like what Conspiracy is really good at in season 1 is it makes it scary that like something's gotten into the tent and is like, what do we do? Like, how do we get this thing out? And it's the dramatic tension of Conspiracy is being refound here, I think, in this season. It's getting more and more scary, I think, and insurmountable, what feels like is happening. But yeah, in no one scenario, I feel like the framing device of him sitting in the bar, having the cadets come up and talk to him, telling the stories, like that worked really well for me. And with the twist, I did not see the twist coming. With that hit me like that. I thought that was really effective.
The ball cap, yeah.
Yes,
yeah,
yeah, because it answered a lot of questions. Like I feel like it answered some stuff that was like, you know, just like he was on Earth with him and never crossed paths, never got tempted as like a young guy. Like he did get tempted. He went and tried and felt like it wasn't the move. And I buy that. I think that's good. The other thing in that episode, I think, is that in the early, I think it's in the cold open, the conversation between Riker and Picard, like right out of the gate when they think they're done. This is the end, my friend. Like, go talk to your son. Don't do what I did. Riker's awesome in this season for sure, but in no one scenario, especially being in command and feeling like he's captaining a sinking ship, is really, really great. His scene at the end when he's sending the message or talking to Deanna. It's not even just sending a message anymore. He's actually talking to her on like a hailing frequency, and it's just great. Like we've said it all 3 weeks we've talked about it. Frakes is just unbelievable. I think as Riker this season. So yeah, that's no, and of course, you know, in no one scenario, I think the resolution, the save of the ship, and the birth of these space creatures, like there's like an awe to it that like sometimes when Star Trek goes there with like the optimistic science fiction flavor, which is kind of harder to do in a season like this. Like it's awesome that they found a way to like incorporate that in this like dark, like you said, kind of horror thriller kind of a story. We get something that's like, you know,
are we back at Farpoint? Like this is crazy.
Yeah, really great choice. Yeah. Really cool. So I think that's an all-time classic episode of Star Trek. One of the best since it's been back since 2017. I think that's a real winner. Imposters. The Ro Laren stuff was a big surprise. I muted all hashtags. I went underground. I got convinced by various tweets from creatives and people who work on the show, like watch it and don't get spoiled. And thankfully, I had a busy day at work and stayed away from Twitter and muted hashtags and didn't know. And when she rounded that corner in the corridor, I was like, holy shit, that's Ro Laren. Like that got me, and that was cool. And you know, it's really cool. The dramatic device of like, now that they can replicate blood, you can't detect a changeling by a scan or by pulling blood. The way you detect a changeling is to like get into the meat and potatoes of your emotional relationship. Like they needed to have that conversation to be able to trust each other. And that's two characters who needed to have that conversation. I like, that's just a story thread that like from 30 years ago, you just never thought would get paid off. I just always assumed, oh, Ro got killed with the rest of the Maquis, and that's that, and we'll never get any payoff to that. And here we are, and they have this scene, you know, you broke my heart, well, you broke mine. Like that whole lead up to that is just so good. It's unexpected. Like it's just something I never thought I'd ever see, and it's not just, and that like the beauty of it. And the reason I think it's so good is that, like, yeah, it's tempting if you're going to be able to do, if you get everybody convinced and you're bringing back the band and you're putting these characters back together. Of course, like, who wouldn't? You put a fan like Terry Metalis in charge, he's going to want to do something like bring Roe back and put him in a room with Picard and see what happens. But to integrate it into the story of the season and have it not just be for the sake of putting those two characters together, but to tie it to the story of the season. And like we said, you know, the way to detect if you're talking to a changeling or not is to have these deep emotional conversations and look for, you know, that makes it even more satisfying and more natural.
Yeah, which we got a little bit of it with you know, Seven, and with the, you know, what is she called, like Commander
Yes.
Seven, or
Yes.
like, you got a little bit of that, but like with the Ro Laren stuff, it just like took like a whole new level of like, okay, this is how we're gonna figure out how to. And there was such great back and forth. It was so beautifully written, because like one sentence you'd be like, she's a changeling, and then the next she's like, no, this is Ro Laren, and you just bounce back and forth. It's so beautifully written. It's so
keeps you on your toes.
Yeah, and I think that.
Did you think she was a changeling when she first showed up?
Yes. Yeah. I was like, she doesn't have the earring on. She's a changeling. That's going to be the tell, is the earring. And my perspective was changed, because like the earring is that's what we needed. That's the you know, all the information that she's. And I totally believe, like, people are like, they don't believe like she can get back into Starfleet and she can rise up the ranks. I totally believe that she can get back up, especially in this day and age with this Starfleet. With, I guess there's some conspiracy theory. Like, I feel like she could easily get back in.
Hey, we're presuming, and I think everybody kind of, we don't know completely. Well, we do, because of Prodigy. Chakotay's a captain. Like all the Maquis from Voyager got kind of like they went through. I'm sure they went through a process, but had a chance. And I would imagine that, you know, somebody like Ro Laren would probably, in the wake of all of that, post Dominion War, post the Maquis are kind of no longer a thing. You know, different people might get different. It's case by case, I'm sure. You know, somebody would have to work their way back, and I'm sure it's a process. But I bought it. I mean, I think if Chakotay's allowed back in, and, you know, B'Elanna conceivably is a Starfleet officer somewhere, then why not Ro? You know, and it's 30 years ago. That's, I mean, it's not like we're talking like a couple of years. I mean, we're talking decades of time has passed. You have to imagine there's a lot that happens up there. She's gone through some Starfleet rehabilitation, mandatory kind of rehab. So.
Like Shaw.
Yeah.
So there's also another example there. It's just like,
oh, you didn't even talk about that. Like his scene in No Win Scenario. Like the No Win Scenario is so packed.
So yeah. So much
yeah. Like, that's the beauty of that episode, is you could talk all day and not even hit all the high points. I think him in the bar and delivering that monologue about Wolf 359 is like an all-timer moment. Like, you can, it's great. It's great. The season's awesome. I've said a couple times on Twitter, like, my grade point average system is kind of blown up. I don't know what I'm going to do. In my mind, I'm like, if this season collectively is like Wrath of Khan level, like at the very top of like the episode rankings, like, I guess I can reason it, because that's what it's going to wind up being. It's like, unless it falls on its face in these last 5 episodes,
that's the thing with these 10 episode seasons. It's like, how do you
can't but up until this point, I haven't had a problem. Like, up until this point, even in a 10 episode season of Lower Decks or Strange New Worlds, like, there are episodes that are good or okay. Like, it all kind of averages out to like end up actually kind of working in a cohesive, like, they're all kind of in the same ballpark. This is going to be the first one out of like 40 however many seasons that looks like a complete outlier, because, like, how do you give anything that's happened so far under a good grade? Like, you can't. Like, it's just it's not possible. I don't think. Like, maybe, I'm sure there are people out there. I know there are people out there who aren't into it, but this is like made for me. I'm 100% in. I could not be happier with it.
Yeah, like, even these hardcore like TNG, like, purist. Like, how do you not? It's just, yeah, I don't know.
I don't know. I think it's everything that I've been waiting 25 years for this, like for sure. I mean, I've been waiting for a long time. I mean, this is what I always wanted out of the Next Generation, like movies. Like I said this last week, like go big, like do big things with the characters, move it forward. You know, like have things happen to them, and you know, the movies were mixed results, but never quite were able to do that. And this is doing it. I mean, we're getting some big stuff. And I can't take credit. I heard it on a podcast. I think it's called Transporter Room 3. They were recapping No Win Scenario. And they said, like, go back to 1999 and imagine being told that you're going to see 7 of 9 hunting for a changeling on a ship with Picard, Riker, and Crusher. Like, it's just nuts. I mean, on one hand, it's like almost like too fanficky. Especially back then, you'd be like, oh, they're never going to do that. Like, that's something a fan.
That was the thing. They were too scared of doing it.
Yeah, that was never going to happen. That's what they're doing. That's what it is. It's crazy. Yeah, so we're halfway through. We'll continue to do this. We'll do our topic of the week and our rewatch recap, and at the end, we'll just kind of touch on what we think of Picard for a few minutes. I'm enjoying that. You know, and I'm really glad. Like we kind of kicked off saying that we're watching TNG as we're experiencing this season of Picard. I think it's helping both. It's helping the TNG experience. It's helping the Picard experience, and it's all kind of working out well. So it's been fun.
Yep. Again, thank you everybody for watching. The discussion does not have to stop here. Discord has some really great, like, some really good spoiler discussions with all the stuff that's happening right now. So definitely check out the Discord, and then Twitter for all of rankings and stuff. Will get posted, I think, after this. Mm-hmm. But we'll see you guys in 2 weeks.
2 weeks. Yep. We'll be back with more. Not sure what it's going to be yet, but we'll come up with something hopefully fun, and we'll definitely be talking Picard with it. So, great.
Yep.
Thanks, everybody. Take care.